Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Eagles offseason, giving them a grade. I gave them a B+, if only because they lost some of their big players to retirement in Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey. We also talked a lot of NBA earlier in the show as Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks from the Nets for 4 unprotected firsts. One protected first, a pick swap, Bojan Bogdanovic, and a second. And we also talked about the other pick swaps that the Nets made as they hit the big red reset button and start their rebuild for real. They did a good job kicking it off right. They've got a lot of assets to make a successful rebuild happen faster than if they just let it ride and faded away into obscurity. So good move by them. And then we also talked about Bam Adebayo and the Heat, what they might do after he signs a 3-year, $166 million deal to stay in South Beach, what that means for Jimmy Butler and everyone else in the NBA. But like I said, in this segment, we are going to finish up our NFL coverage, finish up our Eagles coverage to close out our show today, talking a little bit about their schedule. We're going to go game by game, break down the matchups, what I think is going to happen, and give them a record prediction and if they will make the playoffs or not. So stick around for that. But before we get into it, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. For instance, Kelsey brings up Alex Morgan not being on the U.S. team. That is a shame. I believe, again, I haven't looked too much into it, so I apologize, not too educated on that, but I'm pretty sure it's because of retirement, right? Or injury. But anyway, it is a shame that the U.S. soccer team is really good, and it's going to continue to get better. They've got a lot of rising stars coming up, both on the men's and the women's side. But we are going to get into the Eagles' schedule here. Go over the schedule predictions for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024. And like I said, they were coming off what was a miserable second half of the season for them. Second half of the season where after the bye week, they won their first 2 games, but then lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They lost 5 of their last 6 games, only beating the Giants in what was a tight game against Tommy DeVito there. But you know, they finish up their season last year 11-6. They make a playoff wild card game. They lose to the Buccaneers on the road. And it just was a huge downhill slope for them. They look to rebound. We talked about their offseason, all of their additions, and they kick off their first game in Brazil on a Friday against the Packers. 2 green teams in a place where they can't wear green is an interesting decision by the NFL. But this is going to be a good game to start off, and I think the Eagles, with their new weapons, are going to be able to take game 1. It's going to be a tight one. Excuse me. It's going to be a tight one in Brazil. But I'm taking the Eagles to beat the Packers week 1. Jordan Love and the Packers are going to be really good this season. We obviously saw them win a playoff game last season, maybe almost beat the 49ers after that, but they weren't able to hold on. But I have the Eagles taking week 1 in a tight one against the Packers. Brazil, yes. I don't know why they're going to Brazil. They're trying to expand the game, and playing in Brazil, it's a big market. They got a nice stadium. Big football fans over there. Why not try out Brazil? Spread the game to South America. But it's going to be the second game of the season, a Friday night, taking place in Brazil, and I have the Eagles taking that in week 1. Week 2, they have the Falcons at home. They played Kirk Cousins a lot when he was on the Commanders. I have them taking that, winning week 2, going a quick 2-0 on the season, have everything going good. And then they have 2 games, week 3 and week 4, against the Saints and the Buccaneers. Those are both On the road, those are both those are both tough games. I have them. I had a tough decision with these two because I have a feeling that they're going to drop one of them, not both, but one. I have them losing week 3 to the Saints. Just again, this is a game that could go either way, but in the Superdome down there in New Orleans is a place that the Eagles have struggled a little bit at times, and I think after getting on that hot streak, focusing on the Buccaneers, the team that eliminated them from the playoffs last season, I think they might look ahead a little bit, which I do think they're going to take that game against the Bucs. So start that season 3-1, and they have an early bye week this year. They have a bye week in week 5, and that's going to be a question of how it's going to affect them down the stretch. Because after that, they play 13 straight games to close out the season, and that is not an easy thing to do. When you look at their schedule, they have to play the entire AFC North. The AFC North might be the toughest division in football this season, and all of that is backloaded. The first one in that division that they play is actually right off the bye against the Browns, and that defense I think is going to be a little much for the Eagles. I have them falling to 3-2 after week 6 here. And then they get their first division game, taking on the Giants. And like I was saying to Eric earlier, as much as it hurts me to say this as a Giants fan, the Eagles are just a better team. We lost Saquon Barkley. There's going to be a lot. I feel like this game in particular in MetLife Stadium is going to be very chippy, that week 7 game. But I think the Eagles are going to take this game in MetLife. Maybe a Saquon Barkley revenge game isn't going to be fun, but I have the Eagles taking this, going to 4-2 on the season. Then they travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. That's going to be too much. I have them losing that game in week 8 before going back home, taking on the Jaguars in week 9. And this is an interesting matchup. We've seen this matchup before. Trevor Lawrence just got extended. The last time we saw it, it was rainy and the Jags played awful. We'll see what happens this time. I think the Jags will take this game, and through 9 weeks of the season, so halfway through the year, the Eagles are 5-3 in charge, of the division. And something that I brought up last year, the Eagles did not win the division last year. The Cowboys ended up winning it. A trend in the NFC East. No team has won the NFC East twice in a row since the Eagles did it in 2003, 2004. So that's something to keep in mind here. It's something that I don't really see stopping this season. But then they go week 10 to the Cowboys in Jerry World on the road against a division rival. I have them losing that game. So they fall in week 10 to 5-4. Then they get the Commanders week 11, should be an easy game at home, before going out to LA to take on the Rams. That is a long flight. But I have them taking that one. Again, I think that'll be a tight game, but I'll have them taking that game week 12 on the road, improving their record to 7-4, Week 13 at the Ravens. Again, another cross-country flight, this time against the Ravens. That's not going to work out for them. I have them losing that. They are 7-5 before they go to the Panthers. Week 14. I think the Panthers are going to be much better this year. I really do. But this Eagles team is, frankly, is going to continue to be better. Like I said, they made improvements in the offseason. I don't think they'll collapse down the stretch. So I will take the Panthers to lose to the Eagles in week 14. And then we kind of get to the back half of the schedule. 15, 16, 17, 18. They play the Steelers week 15. That tough defense after 10 straight weeks of playing football is going to be too much for them. I have the Steelers taking that game. So they currently sit at 8-6, basically tied with the Cowboys for the division, tied with the Cowboys if everything goes the way that I have it predicted in week 16 at the top of that division. And they have 3 straight division games to end it out against the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Giants. I have them beating the Commanders, and then the Cowboys week 17. that is in Philly, and I think that's going to be the difference. That is going to be a raucous crowd because that game could decide the division. I have the Cowboys losing that game week 17, and then I have week 18 against the Giants. And at this point, the Cowboys, if everything is the way I have it, the Cowboys are 9-7, and the Eagles would be 10-6 at this point. So this is a game that they have to win against the Giants. And as much as I hate to say it, as much as I hate to go against my Giants twice, this is a game that they have to win the division. And I think the Eagles will take care of business there, finishing up the season on a 3-game win streak versus the division, finishing 11-6, winning the division by 1 game over the Cowboys, who had finishing 10-7 this year. It is going to be, it is what it is, right? But you got to take your fan hat off sometimes, and go with what's right. Again, that's all the way out in week 18, so anything could happen. Maybe the Giants are 16-0 at that point, but but anyway. I've got the Eagles winning the NFC East at 11-6, continuing that trend of a new champion for the last 20 years in the NFC East. They'll have a top 4 seed in the playoffs this year, and we'll see if they can build off of their past 2 seasons. Eric asks, the Eagles during the regular season isn't the problem, but do you believe if healthy the Eagles can beat the 49ers? That is the question, right? I think the Eagles have done a really good job of kind of going bar for bar with the 49ers, right? You have Christian McCaffrey versus Saquon Barkley, probably the 2 best running backs in the league. I'm still giving that to McCaffrey. In the quarterback position, I think Jalen Hurts is better than Brock Purdy. The wide receivers for the Eagles are better. But in the playoffs, anything can happen. We saw the Eagles beat them in the playoffs. We saw the 49ers kill them in the regular season last season. But that's going to be a fun one if it gets there. I do think that we might come down to that as the season goes on. But this 49ers team is really good. And if healthy, I think this Eagles team can beat anybody. They have, if you just look at that roster, again, they've fixed up that secondary. I like the draft picks they made, being able to shore up that secondary and get Devin White in coverage against George Kittle is going to be huge. But again, if healthy is the big question. That's a good caveat to add there, Eric. But yeah, I have the Eagles finishing 11-6 on the year, finishing on a 3-game win streak, just squeaking out that division over the Cowboys in what should be hopefully a fun race to watch down the stretch. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Tomorrow we'll talk about the NBA draft. We'll talk about the Commanders tomorrow. Give an offseason recap for them, as well as a schedule prediction as well, and anything else that goes on in the world of sports. See you same time, same place tomorrow. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.